"Peter, I need to tell you something," my wife Camila whispered on the phone, her voice shaking in a way I had never heard before. "I'm pregnant with Ricardo's baby." I stopped signing the $200 million contract on my desk and felt the blood drain from my veins. Ricardo. My cousin. The same guy who called me every week asking to borrow money, saying he was broke after his divorce. "I want a divorce, Peter. And I'm taking half of everything you have," she continued, now more firmly. "Ricardo told me you're the heir to Brooks Industries. We're going to leave this town and start a new life with your family's money." I should have been in shock. I should have been screaming, breaking things, feeling my world collapse. But all I could do was laugh softly as I looked out the window of my office on the 32nd floor, watching Atlanta stretch out endlessly below me. Because Camila and Ricardo had no idea what they were getting themselves into. My name is Peter Brooks, I'm 34 years old, and I just found out that my wife is cheating on me with my cousin because of a misunderstanding that is going to cost us both dearly. They think Ricardo is stealing the billionaire heir to Brooks Industries. The problem is, Ricardo has no idea who really runs this company. I grew up watching my mother struggle to keep our small bakery afloat in a working-class neighborhood in Atlanta. She worked 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, to give me a decent education. Meanwhile, Ricardo grew up in my aunt and uncle's house, always getting everything handed to him on a silver platter, never having to work hard for anything. When I graduated with a degree in business administration with a concentration in corporate finance, my mother said something I've never forgotten. "Peter, people who are born with a silver spoon in their mouth never learn to value what they have. But you, my son, you know the value of every penny." It was that mindset that led me straight to Brooks Industries 8 years ago, starting as a junior financial analyst. The company was a powerhouse in the construction and real estate development industry, bringing in billions annually and employing over 15,000 people across the southeastern United States. Eleanor Brooks, the matriarch of the family and founder of the company, took notice of me in my first few weeks. She was 70 years old, with a razor-sharp mind and zero patience for incompetence. During a board meeting, when I presented an analysis that would save $3 million on a shopping mall project, she looked at me over her glasses and said, "This kid knows business." It was Eleanor who promoted me quickly, who taught me the secrets of the industry, and who eventually introduced me to her granddaughter, Camila Brooks. Camila was everything I didn't expect from the heiress to a multi-billion-dollar fortune. Sweet, seemingly simple, always talking about how she wanted a normal life away from the spotlight of her family's wealth. She said she felt suffocated by expectations and dreamed of a marriage based on love, not family contracts or corporate alliances. I fell completely in love with that version of her. What I didn't realize at the time was that Camila was a master at appearing helpless. While I climbed the corporate ladder through sheer merit, working weekends, coming up with innovative solutions, consistently increasing profits, she watched from the sidelines, allowing me to become indispensable to Brooks Industries. Eleanor made me executive director 2 years after our wedding. "Peter," she said on the day of the promotion, "you're not just the son-in-law I would choose for Camila. You're the successor I've always dreamed of for my company." But there was one detail that even Eleanor didn't know at the time. Camila had begun to find our life boring. She complained that I worked too much, that we never traveled, that our routine was predictable. What she really meant was that I wasn't the rich, idle playboy she imagined a successful executive should be. That's where Ricardo came into the story. My cousin always had a knack for showing up at the right time. Divorced, broke, but still maintaining that superficial charm that impressed naive people. When he started hanging out at our house, always with a sad story about his financial difficulties, I genuinely tried to help. I lent him money, offered him professional contacts, even tried to get him a job at the company. But Ricardo was allergic to honest work. He preferred quick schemes, always looking for a way to get rich without effort. And apparently, he thought Camila was exactly that. If you're enjoying this story of betrayal, ambition, and billionaire misunderstandings, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how this revenge will unfold. Because while Ricardo thought he was winning over the wife of a rich heir, and Camila was planning how to divide a fortune she thought I would inherit, neither of them knew that I already controlled much more power than they could have imagined. And when they discovered the truth about who really ran Brooks Industries, it would be too late to turn back. The line was still open. Camila waited for a response, probably anticipating tears or desperate pleas. But all she heard was my calm voice, "See you tomorrow to discuss the details of the divorce, Camila. I have a surprise for both of you." The call ended, and I stood in my office, staring at the contracts scattered across my desk. $200 million in real estate development awaiting my final signature. Projects that would employ thousands of people, that would transform entire neighborhoods in Atlanta. And meanwhile, Camila and Ricardo thought they were orchestrating the con of the century. Ricardo had always been the unlucky cousin in the family. 3 years older than me, he grew up believing that charm and smooth talk would make up for a lack of discipline and hard work. As a teenager, while I delivered newspapers at 5 in the morning to help my mother, Ricardo was spending his parents' allowance on designer clothes and dates with girls. When we met again 2 years ago, after almost a decade without contact, he was divorced and broke. His ex-wife had kept the house, the car, and half of the investments he had lost in get-rich-quick schemes. Ricardo showed up at my door with a dramatic story about how he needed to start his life over. I felt sorry for him. Genuinely. I offered him $15,000 to get back on his feet. Then it was another $10,000 for an investment opportunity he couldn't pass up. Then another $5,000 for a medical emergency. Always with promises of repayment that never materialized. But Ricardo was smart about one thing: observing and mapping opportunities. During his frequent visits to our home, he studied our dynamics, our routine, our lifestyle. And he came to a completely wrong conclusion about my position at Brooks Industries. To him, I was just a lucky son-in-law who had married into money. An ordinary guy who had gotten lucky with a billionaire heiress and now lived off his wife's family allowance. He saw the late-night meetings, the urgent phone calls, the weekends spent working, and interpreted it all as theater, as if I were just pretending to be important to impress Eleanor Brooks. "Peter has always been the goody-goody of the family," he once said to Camila, not knowing I was listening from the kitchen. "But let's face it, Camila. You're the real prize here. Your grandmother built an empire. You've got Brooks blood running through your veins." Camila laughed that sweet laugh that once made me fall in love with her. "My grandmother loves Peter. She says he has business acumen. But you're right, Ricardo. In the end, family is family." It was at that moment that I understood the trap they were setting for me. Camila had always resented her family's expectations. She grew up knowing she would inherit billions, but she would also inherit immense responsibilities. Eleanor Brooks didn't raise spoiled grandchildren, she raised successors. Camila had taken business classes since she was 16, spent summers working on construction sites, and learned to read financial statements before she even finished high school. But Camila hated it all. She wanted freedom, adventure, the ability to spend money without thinking about consequences or legacies. When we got married, she believed she had found the perfect solution: a competent husband who would take care of business while she finally lived the carefree life she had always dreamed of. The problem was that I took business too seriously for her liking. Ricardo offered her a tempting alternative: if she divorced me and took half of my assets, which in his distorted view, included a significant stake in Brooks Industries, she would have complete freedom and enough resources to live as she pleased. And he, of course, would be there to help her manage her new fortune. It was a brilliant plan. Except for one crucial detail that neither of them knew about. Eleanor Brooks didn't leave the company to Camila. She left it to me. Not officially, not on paper, not yet. But in practical terms, I had controlled every major decision at Brooks Industries for 2 years. Eleanor remained honorary president, but I signed the contracts, I approved the budgets, I ran the board meetings. Camila knew I worked at the family business, but she never took an interest in the specifics of my job. To her, I was an executive, a vague position that could mean anything from administrative manager to vice president. She never asked about hierarchies, responsibilities, or corporate structure. And Ricardo? He was so focused on what he believed was my dependence on Camila's wealth that he never questioned why I worked 70 hours a week or why Eleanor sought me out personally to discuss expansion strategies. In their eyes, I was a trophy husband who pretended to work hard to keep up appearances. The irony was delicious. While they planned to steal a fortune they believed I had inherited through marriage, the truth was that I had built my position through pure merit, sweat, and consistent results. Eleanor Brooks didn't choose me as her successor because I was her son-in-law. She chose me because I turned a family business into a modern corporation, because I increased profits by 40% in 5 years, because I managed to expand operations to 6 different states. But Ricardo and Camila knew none of that. To them, I was just the obstacle between Camila and her rightful inheritance. An obstacle that could be removed with a combination of romantic betrayal and strategic legal proceedings. Camila called again 2 hours later. "Peter, I forgot to mention something," she said, her voice now laden with a confidence that made me smile. "Ricardo said you'll probably try to complicate the divorce. But my lawyer assured me that, as the direct heir to Brooks Industries, I have specific rights to the marital assets." "Interesting," I replied, leafing through the quarterly financial report. "And which lawyer recommended that strategy?" "The best divorce lawyer in Atlanta. Marcus Stevenson. He's handled billionaire breakups. He said my case will be simple." Marcus Stevenson. I knew the name. A competent lawyer who specialized in high-profile cases involving family fortunes. Probably an excellent professional for conventional cases. Unfortunately for Camila, this would not be a conventional case. "See you tomorrow then, Camila. Bring Ricardo along. I'm sure he'll want to follow the negotiations closely." "Of course he'll be there, Peter. After all, Ricardo understands business better than you do. He'll help me make sure I get exactly what I deserve." I hung up the phone and opened the bottom drawer of my desk, where I kept the most important Brooks Industries documents. Corporate bylaws, succession agreements, executive management contracts. Documents that would show, very clearly, who really controlled the billions that Camila and Ricardo believed they were stealing. Tomorrow's meeting would be educational for everyone involved. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock the following afternoon in Marcus Stevenson's office. But at 9 in the morning, Camila was already calling with more important details about our divorce. "Peter, I forgot to tell you that Ricardo did some research on Brooks Industries," she said, her voice laden with a confidence that made me question whether she was really the same shy woman I had met 5 years ago. "He found out that your position in the company may not be as solid as we thought." "Interesting. Ricardo doing research. And what exactly did he find out?" I asked, feigning concern as I signed off on an $80 million shopping center project. "Well, Brooks Industries is technically a family-owned company controlled by my grandmother. And you're just an employee, Peter. A very well-paid employee, of course, but still an employee." She paused, letting the information sink in. Ricardo explained that in the divorce, I would be entitled to the marital assets, but I could also claim a stake in the management of the family business, since I am the true heir. Ricardo had done his homework. To a point. "I see," I replied calmly. "And Eleanor? Did her grandmother agree with this interpretation of the corporate structure?" Silence on the other end of the line. A silence that lasted long enough for me to know that neither Camila nor Ricardo had talked to Eleanor Brooks about their brilliant plans. "We haven't discussed the details with Grandma yet," Camila admitted, her voice losing some of its previous confidence. "But Marcus said that legally, my position as direct heir gives me specific prerogatives." Marcus Stevenson was giving advice based on incomplete information. Very incomplete. The truth about my relationship with Eleanor Brooks was something Camila had never been interested in fully understanding. To her, I was the hard-working son-in-law who impressed her grandmother with his dedication and competence. She didn't know that Eleanor had spent the last 2 years meticulously preparing me to take over the company. Eleanor Brooks didn't build a multi-billion-dollar empire by being sentimental about family ties. She built it by coldly evaluating competence, vision, and determination. And after watching Camila squander learning opportunities throughout her adult life, while I turned every challenge into exponential growth, she had made a very clear choice about the future of Brooks Industries. A choice that was documented in succession agreements that neither Camila nor Ricardo knew existed. "Peter, are you still there?" Camila asked, interpreting my silence as concern. "I'm here, Camila. Just processing all this." "Look, I don't want to be cruel to you," she continued, now adopting an almost maternal tone. "I know this must be scary. You've built your identity around working for my family's company. But it's time to face reality. You're a talented employee, nothing more." Talented employee. If she knew that I had signed contracts worth $500 million in the last week without consulting anyone, she might have rethought that classification. "What about Ricardo?" I asked. "What exactly is his role in this new family structure?" "Ricardo will help me manage my inheritance properly," she replied without hesitation. "He has experience in investing and understands how to maximize returns. Something you've never been able to do right, Peter." You've always been too conservative, too cautious. Ricardo thinks big. Ricardo thinks big. The same Ricardo who had lost $70,000 in a pyramid scheme the year before. The same one who asked me to lend him $5,000 last week to pay the rent on a one-bedroom apartment in a suburb of Atlanta. But apparently, in Camila's distorted perception, these financial failures were evidence of entrepreneurial vision. Camila, can I ask you a personal question? I interrupted her plans for corporate reorganization. Sure. When exactly did you and Ricardo become romantically involved? Another silence. Longer this time. Does that matter now, Peter? The important thing is that we've discovered we have a real connection. Something you and I lost long ago. Just curious about the timeline, I insisted. Was it weeks? Months? A few weeks, she admitted reluctantly. But Peter, it wasn't planned. It just happened. Ricardo understands my frustrations with our marriage in a way you never did. A few weeks. Coincidentally, a few weeks ago, Ricardo had asked me about specific details of Brooks Industries' financial structure. Questions that at the time seemed like casual curiosity, but now took on a new perspective. He had identified Camila as his winning ticket, and calculated exactly how to seduce her with promises of a more exciting and prosperous life. And Camila, bored with the responsibility and discipline that a real marriage demanded, had taken the bait hook, line, and sinker. See you at 2 then, I concluded. I'm sure it will be an enlightening conversation for all. I hung up and immediately dialed a number I should have called long ago. Eleanor? It's Peter. We need to talk urgently. Eleanor Brooks answered on the second ring, her voice as clear and authoritative as ever at 72. Peter, dear. What interesting timing. I just received a very peculiar call from Marcus Stevenson's office. My stomach tightened. About what? Apparently, my granddaughter is questioning the management structure of our company. The lawyer wanted to confirm details about corporate hierarchy and succession rights. Eleanor paused, and I could almost visualize the predatory smile crossing her face. I thought you should know before you make any decisions about how to respond to his questions. Eleanor already knew. Of course she knew. At 72, after 5 decades of building a corporate empire, she hadn't survived by being naive about family betrayals or internal threats. What did you tell him? I asked. I said that all information about corporate structure is confidential and that any official inquiries should go through our legal department. But Peter, his voice took on a more serious tone. I need you to understand something very clearly. Camila is my granddaughter, and I love her. But she has never shown any real interest in the business. Never. When I tried to teach her about financial management, she yawned. When I offered her summer internships on construction sites, she made up excuses to travel with friends. Eleanor, Let me finish, she interrupted firmly. You, on the other hand, have transformed our company. You've increased profits, expanded operations, modernized processes. You're not just my son-in-law, Peter. You're my chosen successor. And that's documented legally in a way that neither Camila nor her lawyer seem to understand. The conversation lasted 40 minutes. When I hung up, I had a complete understanding of exactly how devastating the surprise awaiting Camila and Ricardo at tomorrow's meeting would be. They were planning to steal an inheritance. But the inheritance they wanted to steal had already been legally transferred to me 8 months ago, when Eleanor made my position as executive chairman with full succession powers official. Camila was trying to claim control over a company I already fully controlled. Ricardo was counting on stock dividends that Camila didn't own. And Marcus Stevenson was building a legal case based on fundamentally incorrect assumptions about corporate structure. The irony was delicious. While Camila complained that I never understood her frustrations with family responsibilities, she had voluntarily abdicated the only real rights she had in Brooks Industries. Over the past 2 years, Eleanor had offered Camila multiple opportunities to become genuinely involved in the business. Management courses, board meetings, development projects. Each offer was declined with excuses about having other priorities, or not wanting to mix family with work. Eleanor had interpreted these refusals exactly as they were meant to be interpreted, as a voluntary renunciation of her inheritance rights. And now, ironically, Camila wanted to claim an inheritance she had consciously rejected in order to finance a new life with a man who was manipulating her for purely financial reasons. The phone rang again. Ricardo this time. "Peter, man, I know this is kind of weird, but I wanted you to know that I don't have anything personal against you," he said, his voice laden with that false sincerity I had learned to recognize over the years. "It's just that, well, Camila and I have connected in a special way. And honestly, I think we'll all come out ahead with this change." "What do you mean, Ricardo?" "Look, you're a smart guy. You know you have no future trying to compete with the Brooks family for control of the company. But think about it, with the divorce settlement, you'll receive a substantial amount of money to start your own life. Total freedom, man. No family pressures, no impossible expectations." He really believed he was offering me a favor. "And you, Ricardo? What's your plan after Camila takes control of her inheritance?" "We're going to travel first. Camila has always wanted to see Europe, maybe buy a house in Tuscany. After that, I'm going to help her modernize the family's investments. Brooks Industries has potential, but it's being run too conservatively. It needs a more aggressive, more innovative vision." A more aggressive vision. Ricardo wanted to modernize a company that had increased profits by 40% in the last 5 years. "It sounds like you've planned everything very well," I commented. "That's right, Peter. And man, I know it may seem painful now, but in the future you'll thank me. Camila was never really happy being the wife of an employee. She needs someone who is on the same social level as her." Same social level. Ricardo, who lived with his mother and drove a 15-year-old car, believed he was on the same social level as a multi-billionaire heiress. The conversation ended with Ricardo wishing me good luck in the new phase of my life, and assuring me that he would take good care of Camila. When I hung up, I realized I was smiling for the first time in days. Because tomorrow, at 2 p.m, in Marcus Stevenson's conference room, Camila and Ricardo would find out exactly what happens when you try to steal something that was never yours to begin with. And I would be there to watch every second of that devastating revelation. While Ricardo counseled me on my future as a divorced man, I was already 3 steps ahead, meticulously organizing every document that would make tomorrow's meeting unforgettable for everyone involved. The first call was to Janet Morrison, our general counsel for 15 years and one of the most respected corporate lawyers in Atlanta. Janet knew every comma of the Brooks Industries bylaws and had been instrumental in drafting the succession agreements Eleanor had signed 8 months ago. "Peter, I just got an interesting call from Marcus Stevenson's office," Janet said, her voice laden with professional amusement. "Apparently, he's under the impression that Camila has direct succession rights to our company. What information should I give him?" "Absolutely none at this point," I replied, reviewing the schedule I had prepared for the next day. "But put together a complete file with all the executive management transfer documents. I want Marcus to understand exactly how our corporate structure works." Janet chuckled softly. "It will be my pleasure to clear up some misunderstandings about corporate hierarchy." The second call was to Michael Chun, our chief accountant, who managed not only Brooks Industries' finances but also my personal investments and marital assets. "Michael, I need a complete analysis of my and Camila's marital assets for a divorce meeting tomorrow," I explained. "And I want it to be absolutely accurate about the origin of each asset." Interesting timing, Peter. I received a similar request from Camila's lawyer 2 hours ago, but with some rather optimistic assumptions about the structure of your financial rights. Michael had been my personal accountant since before the wedding. He knew exactly where every penny had been earned, invested, and accumulated during our 5 years together. Most importantly, he knew that my position at Brooks Industries was not the result of family generosity, but of specific contracts based on performance and results. "Prepare 2 versions of the report," I instructed. "One based on the assumptions her lawyer is likely using, and another based on legal reality." The difference between those 2 versions would be devastating to Camila and Ricardo's plans. Camila had always assumed that my income came from a kind of family salary, a disguised allowance that Eleanor paid to keep her son-in-law working at the company. She didn't know that my compensation package included profit sharing, performance bonuses based on company growth, and stock options that I had strategically exercised over the years. During our marriage, I had meticulously reinvested every bonus into separate investment funds, commercial properties, and shares in other companies. Not because I didn't trust Camila, but but because growing up watching my mother struggle financially taught me never to depend on a single source of income. While Camila spent freely on clothes, travel, and experiences, believing that our prosperity was inexhaustible because of her family inheritance, I quietly built an investment portfolio that would make us independent even without Brooks Industries. Ironically, the woman who was trying to steal my dependence on her family fortune had no idea that I already had enough assets to retire comfortably at 40. The third and most important call was to Eleanor. "Peter dear, I've been thinking about our conversation earlier today," she said before I could even speak. "I've decided it's time to make your position completely official. I don't want there to be any doubt about who runs Brooks Industries." "Eleanor, you don't have to." "I do," she interrupted with a firmness that had made her legendary in the corporate world. "Camila is my granddaughter and always will be. But she has made very clear choices about what she values in life. And running a business empire is definitely not on that list." Eleanor had spent 70 years observing people. She recognized ambition, dedication, and long-term vision as easily as she identified laziness, entitlement, and irresponsibility. During 5 years of marriage, she had watched Camila systematically squander every opportunity to become truly involved in the family business. "Tomorrow, during this divorce meeting, I want Marcus Stevenson and everyone involved to understand one thing very clearly," Eleanor continued. "You are not an employee who can be easily replaced. You are the future of Brooks Industries, chosen on merit, not by kinship." After the calls, I spent the next 4 hours organizing documents in perfect chronological order. Employment contracts, performance reviews, performance-based pay raise records, executive responsibility transfer documents, and finally, the succession agreements Eleanor had signed, making me not only CEO, but the legal heir to 70% of the company. Camila didn't know these documents existed. During the last 8 months, when Eleanor began the formal transfer process, Camila was more interested in planning trips to the Caribbean and renovating our master bedroom. Whenever Eleanor tried to include her in discussions about the corporate future, Camila politely declined, saying she trusted Grandma's judgment completely. That trust was about to be tested in a very specific way. At 9 o'clock that night, when I finally got everything organized for tomorrow, Camila called me again. "Peter, I hope you're not planning on making things difficult tomorrow," she said, her voice taking on an almost motherly tone. "Marcus made it very clear that legally, you don't have many options. It's best to accept the terms we're offering and move on with dignity. If you're following this story of family betrayal and discovering how a seemingly perfect plan can have devastating flaws, be sure to subscribe to the channel to see how this calculated revenge unfolds." "What kind of terms do you have in mind?" I asked, feigning resignation. "Well, Ricardo has calculated that, considering your position in the company and our years of marriage, a fair split would be for you to get 20% of the marital assets. Obviously, the rights to the company remain with me, as I am the direct heir." 20%. Ricardo had calculated that I deserved 20% of the assets I had accumulated through work he believed to be fictitious. "What about the house?" I asked, referring to our home in an upscale neighborhood that I had purchased outright with my performance bonuses. "The house obviously stays with me, Peter. It's part of the Brooks family estate now. But don't worry," Marcus said, "you'll probably be able to rent a decent apartment with your share of the split." The house I had bought with money I had earned would be generously granted to the woman who had been cheating on me with my cousin, as part of the Brooks family estate. "What about my position at the company?" I insisted. "Peter, be realistic. With the divorce, you obviously can't continue working for your ex-wife's family. It would be awkward for everyone. Ricardo has already talked to some of his contacts about possible opportunities for you at other companies. Nothing at the level you're used to, of course, but..." Ricardo had talked to contacts about getting me jobs. The same Ricardo who had asked me to lend him $5,000 the week before was now planning my professional relocation. "That's very generous of him," I said dryly. "Ricardo really wants this transition to be smooth for everyone, Peter. He has nothing personal against you. It's just that, well, sometimes people from different backgrounds just aren't compatible in the long run." Different backgrounds. Camila was suggesting that our separation was the result of socio-economic differences, when in reality, I had built more independent wealth in the last 5 years than Ricardo had accumulated in his entire adult life. "See you tomorrow, then," I concluded. "I'm sure it will be an enlightening conversation." I hung up and reviewed my preparation one last time. Folder number 1, Brooks Industries corporate structure documents showing my actual position as Chief Executive Officer. Folder number 2, succession agreements legalizing my authority over 70% of the operations. Folder number 3, complete financial records proving that all of our marital assets had been acquired with my personal income. And file number 4, a complete dossier on Ricardo's true finances, including unpaid debts, pending lawsuits, and the real reason he had divorced his ex-wife. Because while Ricardo had researched my tenuous position at Brooks Industries, I had thoroughly investigated the background of the man who planned to manage Camila's inheritance. The findings would be eye-opening for everyone at tomorrow's meeting. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Marcus Stevenson would discover that he was representing a woman who did not have the rights she believed she had, in an attempt to take control of a company that already legally belonged to the man she was trying to divorce. And Camila would discover that the business expert she had chosen to replace her incompetent husband was, in fact, a chronic financial failure whose only strategy for getting rich was to seduce women he believed had family fortunes. Tomorrow's meeting would not be a divorce settlement. It would be a comprehensive education on the consequences of underestimating people based on prejudice and incomplete information. Marcus Stevenson's conference room had a panoramic view of Atlanta, but at that moment, all attention was focused on the central table where our marital charade would be officially dissected. Camila entered radiant, wearing a designer suit she had never worn during our marriage. Ricardo followed her, exuding a confidence that made me question whether he truly believed his own fantasies about business expertise. Marcus began with standard legal formalities, but Ricardo interrupted him before the first page was even turned. "Before we begin, I need to make one thing clear," Ricardo announced, adjusting his tie as if he were about to close a billion-dollar deal. "Camila is the rightful heir to Brooks Industries. Any attempt to complicate that reality will be aggressively contested." Marcus blinked, clearly surprised by the interruption. "Mr. Ricardo, I appreciate your concern, but perhaps we should follow established procedures?" "No," Camila said, her voice taking on a tone I had never heard before. "Ricardo is right. Peter, you work for my family. It's time to stop pretending you have any real power in this situation." I kept my expression neutral as I opened my briefcase. "Interesting perspective, Camila. Marcus, before we proceed with the division of assets, I would like you to examine some documents regarding corporate structure." "This is a waste of time," Ricardo interrupted again. "The structure is simple. Eleanor Brooks is the matriarch, Camila is the heir, Peter is a well-paid employee. End of discussion." "Ricardo," I said calmly, "you've done a lot of research on my position in the company. But you seem to have missed some important details." I slid the first document across the table. It was the executive presidency contract with succession powers, signed by Eleanor 8 months ago. Marcus read it silently, his eyebrows rising progressively. "Mr. Peter, this document indicates that you have complete operational authority over 70% of Brooks Industries." Ricardo's smile faltered. "That's impossible. Camila told me that." "Camila told you what she believed to be true," I replied, sliding the second document across the table. "But Camila has never been interested in the administrative details of the company. This is a record of every board meeting over the last 2 years. Count how many times she attended." Camila took the document, her eyes darting across the pages. Her expression gradually changed from confidence to confusion. I was busy with other things," she murmured. "Busy systematically refusing every opportunity to become involved in the business," I continued. "Eleanor offered you training in financial management. You declined. She suggested you shadow strategic meetings. You chose to travel to the Caribbean instead." Ricardo leaned forward, trying to regain control. "Even so, Camila has family rights that trump any employment contract." I smiled for the first time since the meeting began. "Marcus, the next document clarifies exactly what rights Camila currently has at Brooks Industries." The lawyer read the third document, and this time his expression became genuinely surprised. Apparently, Ms. Camila signed a formal waiver of inheritance rights in exchange for a personal trust fund 18 months ago. "I never signed that." Camila exploded. "You did sign it," I corrected gently. "Remember the boring paperwork Eleanor asked you to sign before that trip to Paris? You said you trusted your grandmother's judgment and signed without reading it." The silence in the room was deafening. Camila stared at the document as if she could make it disappear through sheer force of will. Ricardo finally understood the magnitude of the mistake they had made. Wait, are you saying that Peter really controls the company? Not just controls, Marcus muttered, still reading. According to these documents, he is effectively the majority owner through management contracts with progressive purchase options. That means, I concluded, observing the devastated expressions on both their faces, that you plan to steal an inheritance that Camila voluntarily gave up to be with a man who already has exactly what you wanted to take. The irony was perfect. Ricardo had seduced Camila believing she was his ticket to a billion-dollar fortune. Camila had betrayed a stable marriage for promises of financial freedom with a business expert. And now they were both discovering that I already owned the company they had planned to take over through manipulation and betrayal. Now, Marcus said, clearly fascinated by the turn of events, can we discuss the actual division of marital assets? Marcus's analysis of our marital assets lasted 40 minutes of absolute embarrassment for Camila and Ricardo. Every property, every investment, every penny had been acquired with my personal income. The house Camila claimed as Brooks family property was registered in my name, purchased entirely with performance bonuses I had earned years before we were married. So you're telling me that Peter owns everything? Camila asked, her voice reduced to a whisper. Technically yes, Marcus replied, clearly fascinated by the complete reversal of events. And considering that the separation was caused by documented adultery. Ricardo tried one last desperate gambit. But what about my rights as Camila's partner? I invested time in this relationship. I couldn't help but laugh. Ricardo, you invested 3 weeks seducing my wife based on completely false information. That does not constitute a business partnership. The meeting ended with Camila signing an agreement that guaranteed her only the trust fund Eleanor had set up years ago, the same one she had dismissed as insignificant. $50,000 a year. Enough for a comfortable life, but a far cry from the millions she had planned to steal. Ricardo left the room without saying a word, finally understanding that he had wasted months manipulating the wrong woman. 6 months later, I heard that they had ended their relationship when Camila's money ran out faster than Ricardo had expected. She moved back in with Eleanor, who welcomed her with love but also with very clear boundaries about responsibilities and expectations. Ricardo? Last I heard, he was trying to seduce the widow of a real estate agent in Savannah. Some people never change. As for me, I discovered that managing a multi-billion-dollar company is infinitely simpler than managing a marriage based on mutual misunderstandings. Eleanor made my position as CEO official the week after the divorce, and we've spent the last few months expanding operations into 3 new states. Brooks Industries isn't just more profitable now, it's more ethical, more innovative, and offers better conditions for our 15,000 employees. Turns out that leading based on actual merit produces superior results to leading based on inherited privilege. I've learned that underestimating people based on preconceptions is a costly mistake. Camila saw me as a dependent employee, because she couldn't imagine someone from a humble background building real success. Ricardo considered me an easy obstacle because he confused hard work with weakness. They both discovered that genuine competence always trumps superficial manipulation. Eleanor said something to me last week that perfectly sums up this whole experience. Peter, people who are born with everything rarely learn to value anything. But people who build everything learn to protect what matters. If this story about misguided ambition and poetic justice resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories about how the truth always finds a way to emerge. Because while Camila and Ricardo were planning to steal an inheritance that never existed, I was busy building a legacy based on real merit. And in the end, I discovered that the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, but simply continuing to succeed while they destroy themselves.